Okay, picture this. You sold everything, you left Montana, you buried your past, packed your truck, dragged your boots through Texas heat, spent every single dollar you had. And then, on one completely average Tuesday morning, you walk out to your field and find a cow foaming at the mouth. That is not a metaphor. That actually happened to Rip Wheeler in episode 3 of Dutton Ranch. And it might be the single most devastating setup in any Yellowstone universe show to date. Welcome back, my name is your favorite ranch nerd, and today we are going deep on Dutton Ranch Season 1 Episode 3, titled, and I love this, Act of God Business. Because by the end of this episode, you will understand exactly why they called it that. We have a biological catastrophe, a possible villain conspiracy, a Romeo and Juliet love story forming in real time, and a cowboy with a ghost that just showed up in a green sedan with a loaded gun. And somehow it all fits into 1 hour of television. Buckle up, let us get into it. Before we break down the individual storylines, I want to give you the bird's eye view of what this episode is doing thematically. Because Taylor Sheridan and showrunner Chad Feehan are not just telling you a story, they are building a pressure cooker. Episode 3 is called Act of God Business, and that title is doing a lot of work. In ranching, an act of God event is something catastrophic, unpredictable, and completely outside your control. A flood, a drought, a disease outbreak. But here is the thing the show is asking you to question from the moment that cow hits the ground. Was this actually an act of God, or was it an act of Beulah Jackson? That question is the engine of this entire episode, and the show is smart enough not to answer it directly. Not yet. You have Bate going high, landing a deal in Dallas, wearing Louboutins, doing what she does best. And simultaneously, Rip is going low, watching his herd collapse in a Texas field with nothing he can do about it. The contrast is almost cruel. The show gives you the highest high and the lowest low in the same 60 minutes, and it does it on purpose. That is good television. Let us start with Bate, because this storyline is genuinely exciting in a way that the Yellowstone original rarely let her be. In Yellowstone, Bate's weapon was destruction. She did not negotiate, she demolished. She walked into rooms and made grown men feel like they had never existed. That was fantastic, but Dutton Ranch is showing us something more interesting, Bate using brains instead of bombs. She drives to Dallas, walks into one of the city's most high-end steakhouses, and instead of going in swinging, she goes in strategic. She finds out the hotel already has her beef on the menu without knowing it, because Everett helped her get the product to Claudio, who supplies the kitchen. She essentially reverse-engineered her own introduction. That is a power move so clean it should be framed and put in a museum. She seals the deal, supply contract with a luxury hotel chain. For a ranch that has been operational for about 5 minutes, that is an enormous win. But wait, and this is where it gets interesting. Who sits down next to her at the bar that night? Joaquin, Beulah Jackson's adopted son. Now Bate immediately clocks this. She knows who he is. And rather than her classic approach of verbally deleting the person sitting across from her, she actually listens. She plays it cool. She lets him talk because she knows that anything he says is intel, even his small talk is data. It is a fun mirror of the old Bate, same shark, different strategy. She even notes with visible irritation that he reminds her of Jamie Dutton, which if you watched Yellowstone tells you exactly how much she trusts him. 0, absolute 0. But here is the real question this scene is planting. Why is Joaquin there? Was it a coincidence that he happened to be at the same restaurant, in the same city, the same night? In the Yellowstone universe, there are no coincidences. There is only strategy and violence. Now we get to the part of the episode that made my jaw drop. And I want to spend some real time here, because the show pulled from something that is genuinely terrifying in real life. Foot-and-mouth disease, FMD. Rip is out in the fields and finds a steer foaming at the mouth with blistered, bloody hooves. He calls Everett, the local veterinarian. Everett takes one look and delivers the verdict that changes everything. Foot-and-mouth disease. And if you do not know what that means, let me put it in context for you. FMD is considered one of the most economically devastating livestock diseases in recorded history. It was eradicated from the United States back in 1929. The last major outbreak was almost a century ago. So if you see it on an American ranch today, something has gone seriously wrong. It spreads through direct contact between animals, but also through contaminated vehicles, clothing, soil, and even airborne transmission under the right weather conditions. There is one documented case from 1981 where the virus traveled over 250 kilometers through the air, from pigs in France to cattle on an island off the coast of England. The 2001 outbreak in the United Kingdom resulted in the slaughter of over 6 million animals and an estimated economic loss of $20 billion. The British Army had to be deployed just to manage the logistics of the cull. So when Everett tells Rip the disease has spread beyond the first cow and quarantine is already compromised, that is not just bad news. That is financial extinction. And here is the worst part of the science for Rip's situation specifically. The incubation period for FMD is 2 to 10 days. By the time you see symptoms in one animal, the virus has almost certainly already moved through the herd. You are always fighting yesterday's fire. Rip knows this. That is why he does not argue. He does not debate. He just starts making calls and setting up a quarantine camp, knowing in the back of his mind that it is probably already too late. Everett also drops something that has created some interesting discussion online. He blames anti-vaxxers. Specifically, cattle that are being shipped across the country unvaccinated, creating the perfect conditions for a disease that should not exist in the United States to quietly survive inside animal transport networks. Now in the show, the likely source is the bull Rip bought at auction. That is the smoking gun. But the mechanism, unvaccinated animals moving through auction circuits, is a real and documented risk pathway. This is where we put on the conspiracy hat, and I think the evidence is pretty damning. Go back to episode 2, there is a cattle auction. Beulah Jackson is there. She bids against Rip for the same Black Angus bull. She drives the price up to $10,000 and then she stops bidding. She lets Rip win. At the time, it looked like a flex. Like she was just messing with him, wasting his money, making him overpay out of spite. Now look at it again. She let him have the bull. She specifically allowed that bull to leave the auction in Rip's trailer. And that bull is now the most likely source of the foot-and-mouth outbreak that is about to destroy everything Bate and Rip have built. If Beulah deliberately introduced an infected animal into that auction pool, or even just knew the animal was carrying the disease and stayed quiet, then what just happened to the Dutton Ranch is not an act of God. It is a calculated act of biological warfare. And think about the timing. Bate refused to do business with Beulah on Beulah's terms in episode 1. Beulah wanted a cut of the slaughter profits. Bate said no and found her own arrangement. That is a woman who is used to getting what she wants being told no, publicly. This is the response. The show has positioned Beulah as the female mirror of John Dutton. She is powerful, she is protective of her legacy, she is willing to look the other way when things get ugly. But unlike John, she does not have the audience rooting for her yet. We see her from the outside, and from the outside what she might have just done is monstrous. There is also the mysterious phone call she receives in this episode from a man named Mariano, who is clearly someone with significant power over her and who is rattled by the changes in her bunkhouse. Beulah is operating under pressure herself. She is not at the top of the food chain. Someone is above her. The Yellowstone universe always has layers. Beulah is not the final boss. She might not even be the second to last boss. Here is the thread that could unravel everything between Bate and Rip, and I want to flag it because the show drops it quietly and moves on. Do not sleep on it. At the very beginning of the episode, before Bate wakes up, Rip is already downstairs. He was not in bed. Bate asks why. He deflects. Here is what he does not tell her. There was a dead body found on their ranch, and Rip got rid of it. Now, if you have been watching since episode 2, you know the body belongs to Wheeze, one of Beulah's people who was killed by Robwill and ended up on Dutton property. Rip moved the body. He made a unilateral decision to clean up someone else's crime without telling his wife. And then, at the beginning of this very episode, he looks Bate in the eye and tells her he has never lied to her and never will. He already has. This is not just a dramatic irony moment for the audience to enjoy. This is a structural crack in the Dutton-Wheeler relationship. Bate's greatest fear has always been betrayal, specifically from the people closest to her. If she finds out Rip hid something this significant, not to protect himself, but because he thought he was protecting her, she will not see it as protection. She will see it as control, and that is a completely different conversation. The foot-and-mouth disaster is the visible crisis. This secret is the invisible one, and invisible crises in the Yellowstone universe tend to be the ones that do the real damage. Let us take a breath and talk about the younger generation, because this storyline is doing something smart underneath what looks like a simple teen romance. Carter and Oreana, he is Rip's adopted cowboy, raised rough, fiercely loyal, still figuring out who he is outside of the ranch. She is the youngest of the Jackson family, fire, money, and just enough recklessness to be dangerous. The show has been drawing the parallel to Bate and Rip since episode 1, and episode 3 leans into it hard. Carter peeing on her ex-boyfriend's truck last week was unhinged and also kind of perfect. Oreana's reaction, showing up at his door basically deciding he is worth keeping, tracks perfectly with how Bate responded to Rip in the early Yellowstone years. But here is what the show is building toward, and it is lurking under every sweet moment between these two. Their families are about to go to war. If Beulah is behind the foot-and-mouth outbreak, and Bate eventually figures that out, which she will, because Bate always figures it out, then Carter and Oreana are going to find themselves standing on opposite sides of a feud that is going to get ugly fast. The show literally name-checks Romeo and Juliet as a possible trajectory, and Taylor Sheridan does not put things in a script unless he intends to use them. The sweetest storyline in the show is also the most tragic one waiting to happen. Every Taylor Sheridan show has a character who is paying for something they did a long time ago. In Yellowstone, it was Rip. In Dutton Ranch, that character is Zachariah. We have been getting pieces of his backstory since episode 1. Quiet man, ex-con, found religion, stopped drinking. Rip hired him straight off a prison release, same way he once hired Walker back in Montana. Episode 3 fills in the gap. A woman named Anna shows up at the ranch in a green sedan with a gun, ready to shoot Zachariah on sight. Rip talks her down, and the story comes out around a campfire that night. Zachariah was in love with a woman named Teresa, secret relationship. He was drunk, got in his truck, drove away in anger, and accidentally killed her. Anna is Teresa's mother. Zachariah has been carrying that every single day since. It is a heartbreaking story told simply and without melodrama. Zachariah does not ask for forgiveness. He does not even suggest he deserves it. He just tells it like it happened. The theme of old sins is not just window dressing in this universe. It is the engine. Rip has blood on his hands going back 20 years. Bate has fire damage, literal and metaphorical, that follows her everywhere. And now Zachariah brings his own version of that same weight into the Dutton Ranch orbit. The show is asking, can people who have done terrible things be redeemed? And more specifically, is forgiveness something you earn or something that is given to you regardless? I do not think Sheridan answers that cleanly. He never does, but the question is always worth sitting with. So let us land this thing. Episode 3 of Dutton Ranch just pulled the rug out from under Bate and Rip in the most scientifically grounded, historically accurate, villain possibly responsible way possible. The foot-and-mouth outbreak is not just a plot device. It is a real disease that has destroyed real ranches, real economies, entire agricultural industries. The show did its homework, and it hurts more because of it. Beulah Jackson is shaping up to be one of the most complex antagonists in this entire franchise. Not because she is purely evil, but because she is doing genuinely evil things for reasons that are partially understandable. That is a much harder character to hate cleanly, and Annette Bening is absolutely eating this role alive. Bate has a contract, Rip has a dying herd, Carter is falling in love with the enemy, Zachariah is haunted by a woman in a green sedan, and somewhere above Beulah there is a man named Mariano who nobody has fully explained yet. Episode 4 drops next Friday on Paramount+. And based on the trajectory of this show, I do not think anyone is getting out of it clean. If you are watching Dutton Ranch and want to go even deeper on the Yellowstone universe connections, the real history of FMD outbreaks, and what Beulah's mystery boss might mean for the rest of the season, subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you next week.